Welcome to the Filmmaker's Playbook. My name is Jason Branagan and this is a podcast all about filmmaking. My guest this week is director Megan K. Fox. Megan's credits include the award-winning shorts The Shift and Cailín Álainn, as well as RTE's Fair City, BBC's Eastenders and the brand new Channel 5 thriller Too Good to Be True. Megan is a director on the rise, and today we discuss the role of the director, and Megan shares insights into how she got started in the industry, what she learned directing soaps, how she booked her first gig as a lead director on a 4-part drama series, working with an intimacy coordinator, and as always, much more. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. Thank you for listening. Megan K. Fox, thank you very much for joining me. I'm really excited to talk to you, and massive congratulations on Too Good to Be True.
Thank you. Yeah, excited to virtually be here.
So I know how you got your break in television because we trained together, but could you talk me through the process of maybe getting there? What were the steps to securing a place on that RTE Screen Ireland multi-camera training course? And did you always want to be a director?
Yeah, so I don't think it occurred to me that I could be a director until I didn't get enough points in my leaving cert to do what I really wanted to do, which was like straight up English literature in Trinity or UCD. I'd always just loved reading and writing and stories and poetry, but so I didn't get those points. So I ended up going to DBS and doing a course in film, literature, and drama. Thinking I was just going to be there. I'm mainly here for the literature and drama side because I mean, film. That's just fun. That's just going to be one of the fun classes, right? And then we went into my first cinema history class, and I was like, we were watching like George Millay, like Trip to the Moon and stuff, and I was going, wait, how did these people brought their stories to life in a time when it was really difficult to do that? They didn't have everything that we have now. And so if I love telling stories so much, why can't I do it? Why couldn't I tell them visually? And that's kind of where the seeds were planted to want to make films. Because before that, yeah, it just hadn't even occurred to me. I'd never heard of a female director. So I'm not one of those people who, was like, oh, I was a cinephile since I was a little child. I just didn't even know a female director's name until I was in college. Just kind of sad. And I think the world's very different to that now, thankfully. But yeah, that's where it began. And then I went over to London to do my master's in directing, because at the time, there wasn't really any master's courses in practical filmmaking. So I went over and did my master's in the Met Film School in Ealing Studios. And I guess from there, it was just the people I got to meet there. And we all started, we started making lots of shorts together, applying for, these like 60-hour film challenges and vertical film challenges and all of these different little, prompts to make stuff. So that's kind of what I did for a couple of years, and some of those shorts did quite well. And then I saw the opportunity with the Screen Ireland and RTE to train in multicamera for Fair City, and I thought, okay, this sounds like the only way into TV that I've ever heard of. So I tried my hand, sent in the shorts, and there was, as you know, quite a few hoops to jump through with the interviews and everything to get there, but I'm glad I did. Yeah.
I'd love to just jump backward just a tiny bit and ask you about film and what it was about film when you kind of encountered it in that environment, that kind of that changed your course so that you decided, and actually this is the way I want to tell stories instead of maybe in prose or in the written word. Or
I think for me, actually, it was with discovering Spike Lee's films. I ended up writing my thesis on Spike Lee. And I think for me, when I saw um Do the Right Thing and Crooklyn, and then Bamboozled blew me away. It's a hard film to find, but it was a big component of my thesis. But I think for me, it was more, it was Do the Right Thing and Crooklyn, and Spike Lee's just the way that he tells stories about the minutia of particular corner of life, and lived experience. And it was the first time that I kind of thought I I could have something to say in the small life that I live. There's something, there's stories to tell in just how we react to our circumstances, and how the world around us is shaping who we are as people, and our interpersonal relationships. That all sounds very broad, but I don't know. I guess I always thought, before I saw that film, and before, and Kieślowski's, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but Three Colors trilogy as well was another one that kind of made me have this feeling like, when we can marry the visual and the auditory and the performance, there's just so much more that I can make people feel than just the written word, about simple moments of being a human being. I don't know if I'm saying that in the right way, but like, yeah, it was way more that than like being blown away by these really big stories or this perfect 3-act structure. I was always just much more drawn to character driven films and TV.
I think you said it beautifully. Couldn't agree more as well. So when you did move into that TV world, and I agree, when I saw that course as well, still to this day, I think it's potentially one of the only um, pathways that exist as a kind of defined pathway to potentially moving into television.
In Ireland now, certainly, yeah. Since, because there was the shadowing opportunities on Red Rock when Red Rock existed, and then and they were very much actual direct, from shadowing to getting to direct an episode. Whereas it feels now like a lot of the shadowing stuff now is a bit more of box ticking exercise. Like, it's great for directors of a certain level to just see what happens behind the scenes. But if you're of that higher level that you're actually trying to step into directing and TV, there doesn't seem to be a pathway as clear as, anyway, the one that we got the opportunity to do with Fair City.
Definitely. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that there doesn't seem to be a structure for bringing shadows through to actually giving them a block or an episode at the moment. But I know National Talent Academies seem to be doing more director, producer shadowing and stuff like that. So hopefully it leads to more kind of clear pathways and opportunities. TV is very different than making shorts, where we can maybe take a little bit more time, even though we don't have money and never enough time. But the environment, particularly a show like Fair City, which shoots 4 episodes in 6 days over a 5-week block, is intense. When you began in that world, how different did you find that from what you had been doing and your kind of authored shorts that you had been creating previously?
It was night and day. It was completely different, as I'm sure you know as well, or I'm sure you felt as well, Jay. It was like, I was like, oh shit, shorts didn't prepare me for this world at all. I haven't gotten to choose everyone who's around me on this. I haven't gotten to, and I only say that because, when you're doing your shorts and stuff, a lot of the time it's friends, or it's people you know already, or you've it's friends of friends. It's a very curated group of people, which, we are just people managers really at the end of the day, as directors. So it's a much bigger job when you're on, you know, a soap where some people have been there for a really long time and there's cliques and people know each other, and or there's just established ways of doing things that you're coming in as the brand new person when, and also supposed to be sort of steering the ship. And that can be awkward at the best of times. Like yeah, the pace of it, and also the you know, even just shooting multi-camera and having to think about your blocking so much more and pre-visualize your edit, your cuts and your the blocking and your camera positions, and also have the restriction of shooting on sets and not in reality, you know, not having the 360 opportunity of view. Um, all of that was really, really daunting. I have to, I'm honest with anybody who asks me. The first two blocks I did, I think I got into my car and cried for about 45 minutes after almost every shoot day, just from the intensity of it. Just yeah, just how emotionally crazy it is, and you're just on this operating at this very high level of adrenaline from morning to you know, as soon as you wrap. But but after you get over all the crying, it's quite a lot of fun.
Well, I have to say, I'm really sorry that that was the experience. While it wasn't exactly the same as mine, I did perpetually have nightmares about camera scripts and floor plans through those, like waking up throughout the night going, I should have put a camera somewhere else, or that script is all wrong.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Moving past that initial getting started in that world, what were the lessons maybe that you took from working on a show like for a city in that multi-camera environment that kind of subsequently impacted how you were working on other projects moving forward?
Well, definitely the manners that it puts on you in terms of staying in the time frame, you know, sticking to schedule is is so valuable. Because I mean, I think we all know on shorts, again, because a lot of the time it's your friends and it's, you know, all that, like you always run a few minutes over or run a little bit over your schedule and that kind of thing, and it's like, oh, do we mind? Yeah, let's get it. Whereas on something like Fair City, it's like on the dot, you've got to be finished then, and there's no pickups. So if it's not done, you don't have your episode. Stakes are very high, and you know, in a way, even if you're on something else where there are pickups or there is gonna, you know, there is a bit more time, it is good to go into it with that militant sort of mindset when it comes to your timekeeping, that you've got to know what you want, and you've got to not overindulge yourself, you know, which is we all want to do as directors. We all want to get more shots and more variety and keep going until the performance feels like it's absolutely as great as it could ever be. But I think what working on soap teaches you is that when you have it and move on. And to cut your cloth, you know, if you have only 15 minutes left at the end of the day to get a scene, then what is the coverage that you need to get to tell this story? And yeah, there's a whole lot more coverage you'd love to get to tell it in a beautiful artistic way, or to suggest other ideas psychologically and all of that kind of thing. But what is actually the nuts and bolts of what you need to tell the scene, um to tell the story in that scene? And that's pretty invaluable no matter what job you go on to, because you're almost always going to be in a position where you don't have enough time.
Yeah, I love that. It's that idea of just being really visually economic and knowing what the story beat is and how you cover it, I guess. And as you said, I think even if you had 10 weeks, you still wouldn't have enough time because your ambition is going to change to match those 10 weeks, and you'll still find yourself somewhere with 15 minutes to shoot a scene.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, even on my latest show, Too Good to Be True, there was one scene that we had 5 minutes to do. And it was like, right, well, how do I do this in one shot? There was quite a few moments where we kind of ended up going, well, I had 10 shots scripted for this, but how am I going to do this in one shot?
So you also mentioned something else that I would love just to, I guess, reiterate, you mentioned we're people managers. And I think sometimes when people ask what is directing or what do directors do, it can be a little bit difficult to answer because there is so much, but I think that is a great description, that we're people managers and kind of facilitators, because I totally believe that we're only ever going to be as good as the work that everyone else will do in service of whatever our vision is.
Absolutely, yeah. I had this kind of argument with my boy, not argument, but a kind of funny conversation with my boyfriend recently, where he said he called me talented, which I'm not good at accepting. And then he was saying, like, talk about talented directors, and we kind of had this debate about where I was like, I don't know if there's actually such a thing as a talented director, which again is probably just self-deprecating, but it's like, I'm like, a director is somebody who's really good at curating a group of very talented people to do their best work. You're more of a, like, I do see it more as a curator, and obviously there can be talented curators, you know, in an art gallery, like somebody who puts together all of the elements in the way that coherently makes you feel something. But to me, obviously, you know, in prep, there's a lot there's a great amount of creative work that we do in pre-visualizing how we're going to tell the story through the shots or through the performance beats, and how we want it to be lit and how we want the production design to look, and like, yeah, like there is all of that. But when it comes down to it, I think the bulk of the work is steering people to do their best work by feeling valued, first and foremost, and appreciated in the work that they are doing. And also, you know, managing relationships, interpersonal relationships between people on set, to make sure that I think that there's such a huge importance in keeping everyone in the loop about what's going on across other departments and where we're at with different things. Sometimes that's when when there's a communication breakdown and things begin to fall through the cracks in that way, that's when people start to feel like, well, I wasn't even told about this, so is my role not as important as I feel that it is, you know? So it's a lot about just making people feel valued, um, knowing that, learning how, what different communication styles members of your crew react well to is as important as what communication styles your actors react to. You know, we think so much about, with our actors, what do they react best to communicate what we're looking for in a scene or a performance. But I think we don't spend as much time thinking about what gets the best performance out of our crew as well, in terms of how we communicate with them. And I think that that's kind of an equally important part of the job. I don't know if that answers the question, but
It answers it incredibly well. And I do think it's an often overlooked part of the job, is that, you know, you do have to also direct your crew. You know, it's, I think Tarantino says, you know, your job as a director isn't to, like, realize your vision necessarily. It is to have a vision and to communicate that vision to other people who will realize it for you.
yes, I feel shockingly Tarantino said it better than I'd said it when I was trying to describe why I feel like a director is more of a curator than the artists themselves.
Listen, you still hit the nail on the head. And I think it's such an important principle, this idea of leadership, because I think when people think about becoming a director, it's all, they maybe think of certain craft elements like how to move a camera or why to move a camera or how to block an actor or what to say to an actor. But if you're missing kind of those key leadership and communication principles and tenets, then how you move a camera probably isn't going to help you if you can't talk to your DOP about why you want to move a camera that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So with Too Good to Be True, that was your first show as a lead director, where it's all you, 4 eps, aired in February, is available on the My5 Channel 5 player, stars Alan Leech and Cara Tointon. So I guess if we begin at the beginning of that, how did that show come to be, and how did you become attached?
Well, they had come to it came through my agent. I'm with United Agents, and it did come through my agent initially, because they were shooting here in Ireland. And I think they were keen to get a female director, which is great. Although they did interview on female directors as well. But so it came to me first, and I kind of did an initial interview where I'd prepped sort of quite, I think I never know how deep to go with a mood board for a first meeting. So because I've gotten mixed reviews. Some people are like, oh, don't give everything away on the first meeting, which actually on this project was something I learned because I got that feedback from someone. I kind of pared it down to like 6 slides or something, I think, just kind of key elements visual elements that I saw um that in the scripts, potential for in the scripts that I would have wanted to explore. And they were more story driven than purely visual. It was about symbology that we could work into Elliot's house, Elliot's mansion, and his sort of world is really important in the story. It's a fairy tale that Rachel sort of gets drawn into, but I wanted to have these hints of a sort of warped view of women in his world. So a lot of the imagery that I was playing with there in the pitching stage was to do with that. And I think that what got me the next meeting was that I wasn't just kind of saying, oh, here's the sort of lighting I'd be going for, here's the sort of movement style or the this and that. It was that I was trying to find something more that we could say visually based on the story itself. It was trying to elevate it to that little bit deeper place where not every viewer would notice this, but might feel it. And then viewers who do notice it will think it's pretty cool. um so then I got another meeting. Like they were reluctant, they were open in saying that they were like, the producers were kind of reluctant to trust me with it at first, because I'd only had the soap experience and shorts, and it was a big ask to do 45 long minute long episodes on a relatively tight budget, but with a very big expectation for the production value and everything. But I got a second meeting, and actually kind of funny story that I feel like was I had not heard from them in about a week and a half. They'd said they were a bit reluctant, and they were still talking to other people, but they did like me, and could I maybe do more on my mood board? And I ended up actually writing this like impassioned letter to the producer, being like, yeah, I haven't done this yet, but in the meantime, while I've been waiting to get this kind of a break, I've killed characters off, I've introduced new characters, I've done stunts, I've done this, I've done that, everything that I've done in the soap world and everything that the soap world has taught me, and was like, I'm ready for this, and you won't find somebody who's as passionate about this as I am. So give me a shot, basically. And I sent that. Luckily, I just sent it to the producer and not the execs, because the producer, John, is a mate of mine now, from doing this project, and he is so funny and diplomatic. He wrote back and he was like, I love the enthusiasm. If I was in your position, I'd probably do the exact same thing. Not going to pass this on to the execs, but we are going to give you another meeting, okay? And I was like, okay, well, at least I've got myself another meeting from this. And in the next meeting, I had like a 25-page long mood board. And I was like deep diving into, every element of of the characters and what I felt was important for the drama, in terms of how we pitched characters, as well as I think I just went a lot deeper into story and script and how I was interpreting that than in previous pitches and interviews or meetings. I'd kind of always thought, oh, I feel like this is supposed to be just about visually how I interpret this. And I think it was a big learning curve for me to get this, realizing, oh no, that's what they want to know in at this stage, is how am I feeling this story and how am I going to interpret it to tell the story, not just about how pretty I'm going to make it look. Um, so sorry, I've talked for a long time now just about the just getting the job. The question was to go all the way through.
That's great and really, really interesting. To know, like, to see what that two-tiered process was like in each meeting then, because I understand it in one sense, but I also think it's really interesting the way people the industry looks at soap. And yes, there's a formula to those types of shows, but again, if you can shoot 4 episodes of television in 6 days, or 4 in 10 to 12 on a show like EastEnders, you know, you know what you're doing. You can shoot a schedule, which is kind of half the job, really, lots of ways. When you were in those meetings, were you discussing what you were talking about there, kind of how you felt the shows and felt the characters, or were the producers and execs kind of trying to dig into your previous experiences and work to get a sense of, well, can you handle this level of show?
It was a bit of both. I mean, they were definitely trying to feel me out about, asking more questions about the schedule that we were trying to meet in Fair City or on EastEnders, and, asking if I'd had tricky situations with actors and how I'd managed them. And they definitely wanted to figure out, you know, what skills that I'd learned from this I could apply to that, and get a gauge on, I guess, how valuable it was to them to have a director that, yeah, might not have done exactly this before, but could definitely complete a schedule, because that's kind of the proof is in the pudding there of how they've been doing soap. Um, but then, and I was like happy to answer those questions and was ready to sort of, as much as possible, push what the values were that I'd learned from that. But then I was like, look, they know that, they have the proof of that. So what I have to convince them of is my vision for this project, and what I can bring to it that's different to what another director can bring to it. And I think that is about how you're emotionally interpreting it and how you're going to pitch the characters. Because at the end of the day, look, we like visually, nobody's reinventing the wheel, so it's more about how are you going to draw an audience into this story and these characters.
What was your hook into the characters for Too Good to Be True?
Well, I was really interested particularly in Elliot and the kind of the opportunity to evolve his psychopathy a bit further, to because it kind of starts out like a bit of a Norman Bates, like he just got a bit of a really messed up mommy complex that kind of became deadly. But I was more interested in how he manipulates an intelligent woman into trusting him with not only herself and her vulnerabilities, but with her son. And I was like, for us to not stop believing in Rachel as, our representative in this story, then this needs to be a really subtle and intelligent manipulation. And I think I kind of wanted to lean it into coercive control, gaslighting, and then this kind of idea of benevolent misogyny, which is something that, like, I never knew there was a phrase for it until I started looking into this more, which is kind of, and it's interesting because it's just so commonplace, until recently anyway. It was just this idea basically of in a cis male and female relationship, heteronormative relationship, that the man would be the provider of security, in terms of security and finances, and in return, the payoff is that the woman is supposed to enact her expected roles as a woman in a sort of perfect way. It's like that 1950s housewife thing. You should have the dinner on the table and be dressed up and your hair perfect and look beautiful when your husband arrives home, and that's the payoff because he went to work and he's going to bring home the money. You've got to do that thing. And in this story, it was much more about, to me, what I thought would be interesting to try play with is that it's much more about him love bombing her with all of this stuff, but the moment that he starts to see any cracks in her behavior as a mother more than partner is when things start to turn dark. So that was kind of my way into the character, was kind of looking at the characters, was this looking at these toxic traits that are quite complex, but quite normal, unfortunately, quite commonplace in relationships, but just how, it being drama, just how they could escalate way further.
And I guess you were digging all of that out of, correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine probably a series outline and one episode, because I know from my own experience with these shows that all 4 eps usually aren't written by the time you're attaching as a director.
Yeah, so I was kind of digging that out of the first 2 eps and then outlines for where it was going. And in a sense that was exciting because it meant that if they liked that idea and that route, that could be incorporated, though it wasn't too late for those kind of ideas to be incorporated. So that was an exciting element of it. And I think that was also why they responded so well to it, because they were still in a stage of not being absolutely sure where they were going to pitch Elliot's psychopathy, or exactly sure of how they were going to make sure that Rachel didn't seem like an idiot or like really naive, and therefore would lose the audience's respect. So I think that I think that was something I learned in the pitching process for that, was that to enter into it feeling like a collaborator, like you're not trying to say you've got the perfect script that I really, really want to, I would be, of course you're like, I'd be lucky to work on this, but it's not like, oh, please pick me. It's like, hey, I'm coming to the table with ideas too, and we could collaborate. If we collaborated, we could make something great here. And I think that is the sort of attitude that puts them more at ease as well, because it's like, if you're coming in saying everything's perfect and great, they don't want that. They don't think it's perfect yet. That's the idea, is that you're going to bring something to the table that's going to make it better.
Well, that's incredibly valuable insight, so thank you for sharing. And it worked, and it got you the gig, which is great. So once that news comes, then what was the first step or the first undertaking then when you booked the gig? Where do you start?
Well, on this, as I said, the scripts were still sort of in development, so I did get to be quite involved in the script stage, which was cool. I got to send my own notes, back and forth about drafts and everything, which was great, because it was like, just really knew what the intentions were as well from the writers and from the execs. And then after that, it was casting. Casting was the biggest thing, especially getting our Rachel and Liam, her son, who we ended up casting. Amazing child actor. I will never stop singing his praises. Charlie Hodson Pryor, who had been in the Matilda musical film. And it was very important to me that we did, chemistry reads between our Rachel and our Liam. So we had already seen a couple of kids for Liam, and I was kind of on the fence. And then we cast Cara. And so then I brought in the kind of 4 kids that I was most keen on, and they all did chemistry reads with Cara, and Charlie and Cara just clicked, and Charlie was just so intuitive, that I was like, we'd be mad to not cast him. He's just such a little professional as well. He just gets it, just knows how to behave on a set as well as how to deliver a great performance.
And with those chemistry reads, were you in the room or were they on Zoom, or how did they take place?
I was in the room. So I was in the room for casting Rachel and Liam. Um and everything else was either direct offers or it was over Zoom. So it was great to be actually to be in the room, and especially with the kids. I don't think I'd ever really like to cast kids remotely, because you need to feel how they feel in the room. If you can feel this like a tension off them, or that they feel uncomfortable or scared, or to be able to actually try to allay that and see if you can, because if you can't, you just don't want them being overwhelmed by the situation when they get there. Especially with this role, there's a lot of weight on that character, of Liam, to carry things through, because he is the conduit through which Rachel falls in love with, or falls for anyway, Alan, or Elliot, really. Like, it's so important that she sees that he is getting so close to him, and how Elliot is treating her son. That's what endears her to him, really, in the first instance. So we needed a really strong young actor to pull that off.
You mentioned Alan as Elliot. How did Alan become attached?
Alan was a direct offer. We'd liked Alan for it for a long time. And yeah, that was more of the side of it that I'd never seen before, where it's kind of just discussions between execs and agents, and then you kind of so you're like really hoping you get somebody, and then you just have to wait and see whether the chips fall where they need to for that to happen.
And again, knowing the schedule on these types of shows, I know it can be difficult to carve out as much rehearsal time maybe as you would like. Did you get rehearsal time for this show, or was it kind of just conversations with performers leading up to production? What did all of that look like?
So in terms of just like straightforward scenes, when I say straightforward, like not an intimate scene or a stunt scene, like I wouldn't be a big one on running scenes anyway, or rehearsing scenes. I would be more of, let's read it. We don't even read it through, actually. I mean, we did a full read through, of course, and at that stage some things crop up and you make some notes, and you kind of go back and forth with the actor, or with the actors, and also with the writers, to see, once you've actually heard it out loud, some things just don't fit. But we didn't rehearse so much as we just sat together and asked questions about the characters and the relationships. And I remember that's when we all, myself, Alan and Cara, who play Rachel and Elliot, really went, oh wow, this is gonna be great working with Charlie, because he'd kind of, the three of us and then Charlie's mom, and Charlie were sat around a table, and we were talking, just generally talking about their relationship, the relationships between them and everything. And there's an element in the story of uh Rachel having quite an abusive ex, and a suggestion that she's had bad luck with men. Bad God, that sounds so so minimizing. She's had a string of abusive relationships, and we'd been talking a lot about that, myself, Cara and Alan. And then I kind of turned to Charlie, because he was being a bit more quiet, and I said, Charlie, is there anything you wanted to ask about your relationship, your relationships to Rachel, or your relationship as it develops, or at the beginning with Elliot? And he just did this really mature thing, where he took a beat. When you're younger and you'd usually just be, la, 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 you think he just talks right. He took a beat, and then he said, Well, I just wonder if I've seen my mom be treated so badly by men in the past. Why am I so quick to trust Elliot? And I was like, oh my God. We were all just like blown away. We were like, that is such a considered and deep question, you know? Um, and it changed how we ended up playing it, you know, like he was interrogating the character in the script in a way that enriched it in the end, you know, which was amazing. And then in terms of rehearsal, I mean, we had it was my first time working with an intimacy coordinator, and it was really amazing because it gave us the time not only to obviously make sure that the actors felt comfortable with whatever intimacy they were going to perform, but to actually block those scenes and discover in the blocking of it with an intimacy coordinator present how we could make these moments of like the first time that two people are becoming intimate with each other feel real. You know, it was like a really safe space to actually also not only block out physical touch, but to also discuss what we felt we would how we felt we would react in intimate situations, which is not a conversation that you would always feel that comfortable to have in rehearsal or something without the intimacy coordinator. So it was much more than just about the physicality of the scenes. It was also about creating a safe space to discuss intimacy.
So your intimacy coordinator kind of facilitated those conversations for all of you guys as well. So made that space just feel more open.
Yeah, I mean, just in the simple act of her being there, you know, because I mean, at the beginning, they start off with the sort of just like they touch different parts of their bodies. And I'm talking like touch their ears and then touch each other's shoulders and then touch each other's arms. I'm not talking about intimate places, just different levels of touch and just establishing consent to those places of touch as they went. And you know, they're both kind of giggling throughout it, like kind of thinking this is a bit silly, but it is also just breaking down, you know, not breaking down barriers, but establishing where the boundaries are in a really comfortable way, um, so that they felt very, very comfortable with each other. And then just simply by starting to block it out, you know, the intimacy coordinator isn't trying to shoehorn themselves in at everything. They're kind of just sitting in the corner and there if you want to ask questions, or there if something starts to feel a bit awkward. It's like, oh, this is feeling a bit awkward. How can we make it not feel awkward, you know? Um, but simply by them being there and having created this space where the any sort of discomfort around the intimacy is removed, and it feels safe, is what facilitates those conversations to happen.
Amazing. I haven't worked with an intimacy coordinator on set, so it's really cool just to hear kind of the positive impact of that, because I think there can sometimes be maybe a fear of having someone else on set who was involved, that it may slow things down in some capacity, but it sounds like it probably actually sped things up.
Absolutely did, because it was like a dance that we had coordinated when we got there. When we actually got to shooting it, it was like a dance that had already been coordinated. We knew exactly what we were going to do and how. And I also knew from seeing them block it where I needed to be to catch the moments, because often like when you're shooting a sex scene or an intimate scene, it's really hard to know where you want to be at what moments to get, you know, the actual emotion of it, you know, not the physicality, but the what is going on in these characters' heads with these things happening, you know. So it really helped me to plan my shots as well for that. And then we had great fun practicing our for you know, stunt rehearsals, and also like not just the actual fight scenes and things, because there was quite a few fights and people being thrown to the ground and being pulled out from also all sorts of physicalities. But then there was also the stuff with the blow torches and fire and everything. So everybody, especially Charlie, had great fun with all that.
Right. And I think that again, it's really important that sets are enjoyable spaces to be in, I think. the job is really hard.
Yeah.
So it needn't be made any harder by unenjoyable set experiences.
Shitty attitudes. Yeah.
So I think a lot of kind of new entrants and people who want to be directors ask the question of like, how do you talk to actors or how do you work with actors? It sounds to me in this case, what you guys did was have conversations where you kind of all got yourselves on the same page in terms of who these people were, and that acts maybe as a guidepost through production then. But I was curious about some directors may give lots of notes to actors on set. Some may not give many, depending on how many takes you like to do and all that kind of stuff. But I was wondering with this show, what kind of conversations were you having with the actors on set?
To be honest, by the time we got to set, we weren't talking very much about about, I mean, when we talk about when we block a scene, and I'd be like, I'd just let them do exactly what they wanted to do first, and then I'd kind of go, I'd kind of envisioned it here, 'cause I kind of need this camera angle or something. And then the conversation would be like, yeah, but I don't feel like I've got a motivation to go over here. I feel like this is my house. I'd want to sit. I wouldn't be standing, things like that. That was the main conversations. Like, feel like we were on a really good page with all understanding motivations and character by this time we got to this, to shooting, which I kind of feel you need to be. So the conversations were much more, and no script conversations at that stage. We've already gone through the scripts enough by that stage to know where we stand there. So it was much more about blocking and motivation for moves and for things like that. And my philosophy there is like, yeah, I'll make camera plans or shot lists or whatever, but at the end of the day, what I usually do is go into it and not impose those immediately. I'll just see what the actors want to do. And if I've given reason, if I have incorporated props or something like that, a lot of the time they'll do exactly what I had envisioned. You kind of just have to cleverly create a space in which it feels natural to do that. And if they do something completely different, then I'm more like, oh, okay, what I had planned obviously isn't natural. And why is it not natural? And that might be because there's some piece of furniture that is somewhere that's slightly different than you thought it was going to be, or that, yeah, you hadn't considered the fact that actually this person's been to this house 10 times. It's not their first time being here. So they know where this thing is, or they would feel this way in the space. So that's more what the conversations were about. And I mean, it was just really fun by the time we got there. Like, in terms of talking to actors and notes, I didn't need to give a load of notes really, because we had spent time together, like myself and Cara and Charlie and Charlie's mom had like gone out for lunch together in like Thunder Road Cafe or something, and we just like sat there and played they had these screens in the Thunder Road Cafe where they've got like yeah, like kind of a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire type thing on it, and we just like sat there and played that for ages and just spent time together, just like went for walks together, just hung out. And myself and Alan had more like a lot of conversations because he was in LA. We had a lot of conversations over the phone and stuff, really did just chatting and getting really excited about ideas for Elliot. So by the time we got there, it was kind of just hanging out and having fun and being very casual about the ideas. Like, luckily myself and Cara got on so well that there was no worry about like, oh, I can't give this kind of note or anything. That it was the same with all of them, but particularly with Cara, we really gelled to the point that I could literally go up to her and whisper in her ear, like, if you do that thing with your mouth, it looks kind of weird. Maybe do something different at the end. She'd be like, oh, thank you so much. So, I think just, yeah, and you won't always get that. That's just lucky that I think we kind of formed a friendship and we got very comfortable with each other very quickly. But I think it's just remembering people are people and just talk to people, like, yeah.
Well, what I would say is, I know you said I kind of just got lucky in that instance in maybe some of those relationships, but I think that really boils down to, it sounds to me like you spent time to build trust with everyone. Sure, we can all connect with different people in different ways, kind of instantaneously, but it sounds like you did the work to also build those relationships, which is really important.
Well, luckily I had the opportunity to, a lot of the things we work on, we don't have that time. We don't have that opportunity. So luckily, we had our production office set up and I was working in the production office. So, and they were coming in for costume fittings and all sorts of things. So we had that time. You don't always have the luxury of that time, unfortunately, especially if you're on soaps or, continuing drama or even like say if you're coming in on a second block and the actors are already shooting their first block, you don't always have that. So it was great. It was great that I did get to have that. And I think it made all the difference to the show.
Amazing. Love it as well. We had time.
It wasn't the case once we started shooting, but there was a nice bit of time in prep.
You also mentioned something that I think is worth just drawing attention to, which is this idea that, you have your plan when you get to set, but trust in the fact that all your other collaborators, in this case, the actors, may have ideas that hopefully are better than the ones we get to set with, and allowing yourself to be engaged by those ideas and going, actually, that really works. So we're going to take that.
Absolutely. And like, and even sometimes I'll get to something and I'll go, I'd kind of planned it like this, and I can't even remember why I'd planned it like this, but this feels totally unnatural, actually. I mean, like, what, just what would you guys do? Just show me what you guys would do. And then, maybe the actors will do something, but then maybe the DP will say, well, actually, she's in the foreground here. So if he came out of that door instead of that door, then we can do it like this. And then you're just like, awesome, great. Like, I think there's just like, that's, to me, that's growth as a director, is to realize that like the success of everybody is you succeeding as a director. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like, oh no, that's not how I envisioned it, and I'm the director, so I have the vision, and that's, I'm gonna feel threatened if somebody comes in with something better. It's like, oh no, great, okay, we can make this shot better, even if it doesn't matter whose idea it was. Like, we're kind of lucky that at the end of the day it's still our name that says director, but it's so good ideas can come from anyone who's involved, and always open to them. Obviously, there comes a point where you can't have like every voice at the same time, because you just wouldn't get anything done. But I think when people feel comfortable to offer up suggestions when you're stuck, that's how you get the best out of, whatever you're planning to do.
100%, couldn't agree more. You have mentioned Charlie and his brilliant performance, but I know from working with children and young people on set, it can be more of a challenge because your hours are limited and the amount of time you can shoot with those kids for is limited. Rightly so, of course. But it can be a slightly trickier balance. So I would love to maybe dig into the scheduling of the show and how long you had to shoot it. Would I be right in estimating you were probably doing 6 to 8 single camera pages a day?
Yes, I think so. Sometimes a bit more. Sometimes 10. I think the most we did was 13 one of the days, I think.
That is a lot of single camera pages.
Yeah, and we had a lot of locations as well. Like, we had a lot of we had a lot of locations, but at the same time we had nice chunks of time in each, usually. Which was great. Like, we could really get into a flow when we were in Dunlavin for Elliot's house. We got into a really nice flow there. To be honest, like the child hours with Charlie, for some reason, well, no, not for some reason, because I literally had like the best first AD in the world, Gail Manelli. Shout out to Gail. She literally, I don't know what magic she worked, but I almost didn't notice sometimes the hours that Charlie would have to be in in tutoring and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, sometimes it would be like, okay, I'm looking at the schedule and I'm thinking, oh, I've got this much time until the end of the day. Because, you know, we break down how much time we think we're going to spend on each scene. But at the end of the day, you cut your cloth and you go, I'm going to take longer on this scene. I'm going to take less on this scene, whatever. And then sometimes you get a whisper in my ear going, yeah, but you know, Charlie has to be gone at 4:30, not 6. And I'd be like, oh, no, didn't know that, but we will adjust accordingly. So there was times like that where it would get a little bit like, oh God, but then, you know, you just shoot in such a way that you just shoot everything on your child actor first. And then you kind of can frame in such a way that they won't always be there. I didn't really want to do that very often though, because I didn't want Cara or Alan to not have Charlie to act opposite because he was giving so much. Um, but it wasn't a huge problem on this. He because Charlie also, we ended up calling him one take Charlie because he literally was on it every time. He would get it in the first take every time, which is incredible. It just is shocking for any actor at any level that he just was so on it. That it wasn't such a huge problem. I mean, yeah, sometimes it would be more of that thing, just kind of not having all of as much time at the end of the day with him as we had at the start of the day. But we had a great double for him as well, that would do a lot of the, you know, it was just sort of a dirty shot or something wide where he's lying in bed asleep or something like that. We had a great double for him that really helped with the time that we had on set with him as well. And it's kind of just also about like only calling them to set when everything else is ready.
Yeah.
Making sure you've already blocked, you've already run the other line, all of that before you bring your young actors to the set, and not having them hanging around if you're not ready to go, you know.
How many days did you shoot?
Oh, it was 7 weeks. So what's that? 7 times 5.
35, maybe?
Yes, yeah, that's right. I think 37, I think 36 days.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, it's a lot of material for 4 eps, single camera.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of and then, you know, there was quite a bit of stunts and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. So if we were to look at the visuals of the show, you know, I think there's a really crisp look to it. It's beautifully shot. I know Bertie shot it. I also noticed, am I right in thinking you shot on vintage Zeiss B speeds? I rented those lenses off Bertie some
Yeah.
time back. Yeah, they're gorgeous. We were talking about, you know, how a huge amount of a director's job is communicating and helping all our HODs understand what our vision is. So I would love to dig into when you come into a show like this, which is a show you're setting up yourself, you have control over kind of the entire look and the tone and the texture. How did you work with your DOP, Bertie, and your designer in terms of building the world of the show?
Well, it was kind of a good thing that I had done such an extensive mood board to get the job, because that ended up becoming the Bible for kind of everybody. You know, I had quite a lot in there. By the time I got the job, I had quite a lot in there in terms of both for design, the kind of house that I envisioned for Elliot, because like say in the first instance, Elliot's house had been sort of written to be almost like that kind of ex machina house, like, you know, all chrome and windows and stuff. And I was like, if we're doing this in Ireland for England, first of all, those kind of houses only really exist on maybe like Killiney Hill or something to that level, and also with that sort of look. And I'm like, and then we're giving the game away there, because it's also quite significant that there's land around the house and all of these different elements. And I also liked the idea of there being a feeling of history to the house rather than something that looked super, super modern, and something that felt like there could be these secrets and hidden nooks and crannies and things like that. Um, so in terms of working with my designer, what I had pitched the house as and the symbology and the artwork and stuff around the house was a really good starting point to work with my designer. And we got to commission artwork for the house, for Elliot's house. That was a really fun and interesting process because we got in touch with this artist who does a lot of artwork for film and TV. So he works in lots of different styles. So what I got to do with him was kind of just go to him and say, I'm looking at, I'm looking for sort of deconstructed images of the female form, and something that is sort of, the more you look at it, the darker it gets. And my references were sort of like Picasso, but then also like the Peter and the Wolf book that Bono illustrated. It's like those sort of things. So it was really fun to work with the designer and work with the artist around the artwork pieces that were going to be in the house. And in terms of working with Bershi, because we already had a shorthand from working on a short film together, it was great because he's also very much about interpreting emotive language visually. Do you know what I mean? So I don't have to come to him with all the technical lingo. I'm just like, this is what I want to feel. How do we go about that? Or this is what I want a set to feel like, like say when she discovers the annex, I wanted that to feel like cold and feel like nobody's been in there in a really long time, and it's dusty and you've just kind of been dropped and left there. And I think that the lighting design and the production design married so well in that to give that feeling. So yeah, I mean, again, it was just sort of about having a shorthand and having a visual Bible that I had already created that was quite extensive. And then Bershi and I sort of shared a shot deck link as well. And we just like kept adding and adding and adding stuff to it. And we would like make little notes on it, like for this particular scene, these kind of shots, like especially like things that we were shooting in the car. We were kind of looking more at angles that we could get shooting in the car. And then for just mood and tone setting in the house, some kind of Dutch angles that we could do and things like that as well. So it was just really constantly chatting, and yeah, shot deck was an invaluable resource to be shared, like live sharing stuff there as well. And we just sat together and went through every scene and like had a big whiteboard and just sort of mapped things, and probably did a lot less work actually when we were sitting together than we should have, because we were just pissing ourselves laughing a lot of the time. But that's all good stuff too.
Did you shortlist kind of every scene, or were you doing I boards maybe for like stunt stuff? And
We'd started with the intention of shortlisting every scene, but then it got to a point where we'd shortlisted the first 2.5 episodes, and then it was like, okay, shit, we just need to focus on big scenes and scenes with stunts and stuff, because we were kind of getting down to the wire. And obviously all the time that you keep scheduling to work with your DP when you're in prep, if you're in the production office as the director, then you keep getting pulled off to a million other different things. So then it ended up like I shortlisted for all of our stunts scenes, I shortlisted, and for our intimate scenes shortlisted as well. And then we kind of shortlisted with storyboarded those, which we shortlisted almost everything else. But I storyboarded for the intimacy and stunt scenes. And then I also got lots of visual references of existing shots from shot deck for particularly, like I said, driving scenes or the stunt scenes. And kind of collated all of those pieces together, like the shot list, my boards, and existing visual references, so that for those particular scenes where we knew we were up against it time wise, and also there's extra elements like the stunts and that kind of thing, that everybody was really, really, really on the same page there.
talking about that idea of I guess shortlisting, boarding, using those visual references, I'd love to pick your brain on how you constructed maybe that visual effects aspect of the climax of Elliot's story anyway. And I don't want to give too much away, but I don't want to like massive spoiler or anything, so I won't say too much, but there is fire involved, and that's a theme throughout the show as well. But had you done much visual effects kind of work like that when you got to that point of the script for episode 4? What were your initial thoughts? Like, how are we going to do this? What did the process look like of planning that shot?
I don't know how I'm going to talk about it without let's just say spoiler alert. So I'll just talk about it. If you don't want to know what happens at the end, don't listen.
Spoiler alert, he gets set on fire.
He gets set on fire, exactly. And I guess the funniest thing was when we read it in the script, it was, yeah, when I read it in the script, I kind of kept thinking about Happy Valley, and that I thought that when the guy got set on fire at the end of that, it was one of the few things in that incredible show that didn't look great. And I was like, and also I felt like it was just such a huge tonal shift so quickly to like kind of jump into the realm of almost like horror. And I wanted to keep it more with Rachel and the horror that she was experiencing in the moment, more than the abject horror of somebody being on fire. So I decided to play the moment of him. So she sets him on fire with this previously established, I call it a blowtorch. It's not a blowtorch. It's called a word that's impossible to say. Acetylene cylinder or something. Something car people probably know about and I don't. But it looks almost like a blowtorch. And she basically sets him on fire after a big fight and kerfuffle and him sort of threatening herself and her son's lives. She sets him on fire with this. But she's standing in front of this vintage Land Rover. And so my idea was they have this fight, she pushes him out, and we see the moment of him kind of lunging back towards her. And then the only thing that's close to her as a weapon is this thing that we've established previously, which is the blowtorch. So she picks it up in a moment of not even, I think, intending to kill him, but just it's the only weapon that she has in that moment. And then that we would kind of have the fire come out. We'd see be at his perspective with the fire coming towards us, and then she would drop that and she would stumble back against the back of the car, and so in the reflection is where we would see the suggestion of somebody on fire rather than seeing a shot of somebody on fire, because then at the same time as seeing that suggestion I could see the horror in her face. So I'd kind of like planned and storyboarded it like that. And I also wanted to do as much real effects as I could and not rely on visual effects. I'm not a fix it and post person. I'm a let's get it right on set person. And the main thing there was just about establishing things in previous scenes to be in the positions that we needed them to be in for that moment to work. Was a consideration. And then just in terms of time on that, it was like we had our visual effects supervisor on set with us, and it was just kind of repeating shots quite a few times to get the reference of the distance, say, that he was from the car. So we had to like sort of put the car up on blocks and angle it in such a way and everything to make sure that we got the reflection at just the right angle for where we wanted him to be when she did the action. And then we sort of so we got a shot of him not on fire in the reflection as our kind of what they would build the elements onto. And we got that clean as plate, and then we got the shot with Rachel in the foreground of that as well. And we got the shot of her actually holding the blowtorch with the fire going, and one without as well. And it's just kind of a process of trusting your supervisor who's there and kind of saying, right, what are all the elements? You kind of need to think more about elements than shots at that point, you know. You get your performance in that shot, and then you have to get lots of plate shots and different things that will build up the elements that they'll use in the end. to create that. But luckily, like, I got to pretty much do exactly what I had planned for that. I had just storyboarded it, and while I was storyboarding it and planning it, I was talking to Bershi and talking to our special effects supervisor and everybody, so that I knew that what I was planning would work. So I mean, I think that that's the main thing. I think that it would have definitely not come together as smoothly if, say, we'd planned it with what we thought would work, and then we didn't have a VFX supervisor involved until after the fact. I think that that would have been a very different scenario.
I think it was a great way of doing it and staging it, because fire is one CG element that can really stick out as not being real fire. So had you tried to show Elliot on fire and that being entirely CG in a long shot or something, I think it would have been a much harder sell. But I think you sold it really, really well.
Great, thank you. I'm glad. Yeah, my only thing about that sequence is I kind of wish that the fight had gone on longer. I look at it now and I feel like it's a bit fast. The escalation from the fight to that happening, because it's such a huge thing to happen. But that's something, actually, that I think that's a good tip, and something that I learned from this that I would take away, is that for stunt scenes I would over choreograph in future, like more than what's written. Do you know what I mean? I would try to I would try to add extra beats to the choreography of stunts to make sure that they're long enough, because sometimes it feels like it's enough when you're there, but actually when you've built the drama to a point that it's now at this stage, you kind of need to sink into it a bit more before it escalates to another level. So I think I'll over choreograph in future.
I think that makes sense, right? It's kind of like a fight scene, whether it's big or small, should also have an arc and kind of a beginning, middle, and end. And that's the
Yeah, definitely. And I never thought about that before, because I wouldn't have ever been a big action fan or anything, of action films, or so I never kind of thought about that before, that yeah, within a fight scene there still needs to be a story being told. It's not just fighting for the sake of fighting. Like, and there was emotionally, but I think there still needs to be an arc to the physical drama of it.
definitely. And on that then, in terms of, was that maybe a realization for you when you got to kind of your edit and you're like, oh, I wish I could sit on this a little bit longer?
Yeah, definitely. It was something that only occurred in the edit. And we kind of like tried to do some tricks of sort of reusing beats and to kind of drag it out a bit more. But it was only at that point that you kind of really see how the pace has come together, you know? I think that's the one thing that's hard to visualize sometimes. When you read the script, you can have a sense of the pace, and sometimes you'll go, I think that that scene should actually be here to give us more time between this and that. But then when you actually get into the edit, because if you can't foresee as well how the performance will play out exactly. So that's a pacing thing. I think if you're jumping from drama into going to another level of a fight or a big or a stunt or something, that there is a lot to consider in terms of pacing there. So I think I'd try to overshoot that in future. If you say I'd love to overshoot that, I'll shoot more of that. Yeah, I won't have enough time. That'd be the dream.
So when you got to edit, then what was that process like for you, kind of going into a much longer edit than you get on City or on Eastenders? How long did you have? 16, 18 weeks?
Yeah, I can't even say, it felt like forever. I think it was six. I think it was, yeah, probably would be about 14 to 16 weeks altogether.
Was that process different or new in any way? Was there anything that kind of you took from that particular edit that maybe you hadn't really experienced in continuing drama or in shorts?
Definitely. I mean, the biggest difference is like continual notes from execs. And sometimes notes you don't particularly agree with, and you have to there's a big emotional journey to take from like your first cut that you're happy with, and you've whittled it away, and you've done so much work on the first cut of it, and you're pretty happy with it, and then you might get notes back where they're like, ripping it to shreds, and you're like, oh, you feel kind of, there's almost like stages of grief. You feel like really defensive, and then you feel sad, and then you feel like, what's the point? And then eventually you come to acceptance, and you're like, then with each episode it gets easier, and with each round of notes it gets easier. But the first round is hard. um, but that was a big learn. So that was a big learning curve, and also then learning to trust. I think like sometimes you kind of forget that the edit is still a collaborative stage of the process as well. You kind of get to the edit sometimes and you're like, well, it's just me and the editor, and now it's just, you know, this vision. But it's still a collaborative stage of telling the story. Like, you, just because you've shot what you wanted to shoot and all of that kind of thing, it can still change completely in the edit. But at the same time, it didn't change too drastically, because I don't really overshoot. Like, I very much shoot what I'm gonna use. So it's not like it can ever, for me, really go, thus far, really go wildly, in a different direction than what I'd planned. It's more like sometimes I will have designed a sort of single shot that moves through a lot of parts of the scene, and I would want to play it through from beginning to end, and then they'd kind of say, oh no, we need to break it up with this and that. So yeah, it was the biggest learning curve in the edit, was collaborating at that stage, where very often in shorts and in continuing drama, you still don't really have to collaborate very much at that stage. I mean, you do with your editor, but you kind of get a round of notes in Fair City or EastEnders or something, and then you just do them, and then you give it back, and then it's finished. It's not like a continual conversation about how to play a beat, or say, suddenly saying, we don't think this is clear enough and we want to slide like a line of ADR over this, and then you could be really like, no way, that's like totally spoon feeding this, we don't need to do this. And there's creative arguments, not arguments, but there's creative discussion at that stage. That's a very different level to what you would have at that stage in shorts or continuing drama.
Yeah, and definitely, I think getting notes is always just hard. Even when you get really good notes, the minute they come in, like, I think my body still goes. I've just got to the point where it's like, right, I'll
Yeah.
look at them again tomorrow and I'll be able to see them clearly for what they are. But obviously, with particular timelines, you don't always have the opportunity to
Yeah.
sleep on them.
Yeah, that's where it's tricky.
I guess, look, every job is always different, and hopefully we are learning something new all of the time. I was wondering, with Too Good to Be True, were there any kind of major or key takeaways or learnings that you kind of went through on that show that will impact your future work, or little bits of advice that you would give to yourself, or go, remember, actually do this way and life will be easier?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of twofold. There's things I learned, that I did on this job that I wasn't sure if they'd work or if they would be of any importance or benefit, that were. And then there's things that I didn't do that I would do. So like I said, choreographing extra beats for stunt scenes was just a very practical thing that I didn't do, and I definitely would do next time. Because also when you work with your stunt coordinators, like they're great, and it's like a dance, and they can add beats, they can add moves when you're there. So there's no harm in, if you have the luxury of working with stunt coordinators, to get some extra beats choreographed in there. I think is definitely really, really would be really beneficial to me, and I'll definitely do in the future. And in terms as well of like learning curves, something else that I didn't do and would do is taking that beat to compose yourself before responding to notes, or before trying to implement notes even, like, and you can, like, kind of halfway through it, I said, I'd really prefer to kind of jump on a Zoom call and talk through notes, rather than just getting them in an email, because it can feel very harsh and impersonal, because also, you know, the way anybody makes notes, it's shorthand and it's just like, this doesn't work or whatever. And sometimes hearing a tone of voice behind that can be really helpful. So it was only like halfway through the whole process that I kind of said, actually, could we do it this way? And they were like, yeah, of course. And that really, really helped. So like in future, I'd probably just know that that's how I digest notes better, is if I can talk about them before I just see them hard on a hard paper. And so, yeah, like just as a tip, that you can do that as well, you know, like it's that new thing of the first time I did it, and I was like, I guess this is the way it's done. But there isn't really any hard and fast way that these things have to be done. There, again, remember that you're also a person that your collaborators are trying to figure out the best way of communicating with too, and you're going to make other people's jobs easier if you express how you want to be communicated with. And then in terms of things that were great and I'd just carry on through, was like, you know, spending that time with my actors before we got there, being and spending time with the crew, like everybody on the crew. Like we were lucky that when we were shooting in Dunlavin, we were all staying in the same hotel together. And I spent a lot of time just hanging out with the crew, and it made such a difference. Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably other things. I can't think of them right now. Working with the intimacy coordinator, definitely do it again, and maybe even in future bring in some more scenes to her that aren't necessarily physically intimate but emotionally intimate, and rehearse those with her as well. So yeah, those are some of the takeaways for now.
Brilliant. Well, they're all really, really valuable takeaways. So thank you for sharing. The last thing I would love to ask you is, I know that you have been paying it forward and helping younger filmmakers and offering advice and mentorship and all that kind of stuff. I would love to know, what is the question you get asked most?
It's probably whether or not going to film school is worth it. A lot of people contact me about that. And what I would say to that is a couple of things. One, that to me, for all the film school is a place to meet other young people at the same stage as you who want to make stuff. And the best thing that you can get out of film school is to make good connections with people in it, and just keep making stuff together. And that, to be wary that a lot of film schools offer the world in terms of their industry connections, or even their kit that they have and all of that kind of thing. And a lot of the time that doesn't come to fruition. So don't go to a film school based on those things. I'd say go to a film school based on the ethos that they have of collaboration, and how many projects, you know, they actually have where you can collaborate across the different mediums, because some of them as well keep like directors, cinematographers, producers all very separate, which doesn't make any sense to me. I think like if a course is offering a lot of collaboration between the roles, that's great. But yeah, ultimately, don't go to film school thinking that having a degree in film is going to get you a career in film, because unfortunately that's not how it works. It's like anything really. I think what you get out of it is going to be what you put into it, and it's going to be about having a space to mess up and to try things that might not work, and accept that you're in a learning stage and a safe space to mess up, and making good connections with the people that you meet there. That would be, if you want to go to film school, that'd be the reason. But if you feel like you have to go to film school to get a degree, and that getting a degree might get you a leg up in the industry, unfortunately that's just simply not true. And you could just go straight to, you know, you don't have to go if you don't have the money to go. If you don't want to go, you really don't have to go to be in this industry. You can go straight into, like you mentioned, the talent academies earlier. Like any young person who comes to me for advice, I always push what's the word, advise them to look at the talent academy stuff and these shadowing opportunities that are coming up through them, and all of these training courses. You know, if you just start shadowing, ADing is not for everyone. You have to have a very thick skin to AD. I didn't I didn't have it in me. It broke me. But getting on sets and learning that way and watching a lot of stuff and reading stuff and just networking, going to film festivals, meeting other young people who want to make stuff can be just as valuable as going to film school, if that's not the route that you want to take, would be my advice.
You just mentioned reading stuff, watching stuff. I was going to ask, do you have any kind of must reads or any books on filmmaking or writing or that you would recommend as kind of must haves or must reads?
So I just finished reading this book called Directing Great Television by Dan Attias. That's what it looks like. And it is amazing. He has directed episodes of Sopranos, The Wire, like every great Breaking Bad, like every great TV series that you can think of from kind of the golden age of the beginning of this golden age of TV that we are still in now. And it's just really practical advice and stories about from the very beginning of his career through to directing like huge actors. I really, really enjoyed that. So I would definitely recommend reading that. I've like tried reading some screenwriting books and stuff before, but I just find them very formulaic. And they kind of jar with me sometimes. But Into the Woods as well. It's great.
John York's book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Great book. So
Yeah.
definitely one of my most reads. Megan, thank you very much. That was a brilliant conversation, and I really appreciate you sharing all of those insights. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
And that's a wrap on Megan K. Fox. Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker's Playbook. If you're enjoying the show, please share it with a friend or follow and rate us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We talk about the importance of getting notes quite a bit on the show, and I want to practice what I preach. So if you have feedback for me, please let me know. I'm still learning how to podcast and I want to know how I can improve the show. So please leave comments on Instagram at the Filmmaker's Playbook Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Jason Branagan Director, and you can find Megan at Meg Fox. Links and social media handles are also in the show notes. Join me next week when I talk to the star of The Witcher Blood Origin, actor Lawrence O'Furon. Until next time.